All right, welcome everyone. This is the Jenkins Enhancement Proposal Office Hours. I'm Liam Newman. We have Kosuke with us as well, Mark Waite, Sam Van Ort, and Tracy Miranda. Maybe we'll have some other people join as we go along. All right, so the agenda that I have for this meeting at this point is introductions, and I have a topic to just sort of float past people and around adding new permission groups for the JEP process. And if anyone has any process questions, maybe we can do a quick status of current JEPs, if there's anything we want to go over there. Did anyone else have anything they wanted on this?
So I may have some questions related to an office hours topic. So where I want some coaching on the optional automatic Java source formatting Jenkins enhancement proposal.
Okay.
I have some logistical questions, I think, and I wanted to kind of get some clarification on which venue for particular kinds of discussion around feature implementations.
Right. Okay. Okay. That be questions about the process, or
I'm just
we'll get to it then. Okay.
Yeah.
You're formulating. Okay.
I think the more important one is kind of a little bit more clarification on which kind of content goes in JEP versus Jira versus code reviews.
Right. Yeah, that's good. That's a good.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one for me. That's good guidance for me. Feeling completely inexperienced, I could use some guidance along those lines. See if I'm overstepping in the current technique I'm using. So I'm looking forward to the answer to Sam's question as well.
Okay, cool, great. So let's do a quick status of like the PRs and the JEPs that we have going right now that are open. So we have a few PRs here. There's let's see here. So the first one here is a submission for draft. Both of these are around configuration as code. The first one I know is in a good state. I just need to actually, as editor, do the process of assigning it a JEP number now that we have a sponsor added to it as Evelina. So I just haven't done that yet. The other configuration as code JEP, I need to get Nicola to kind of jump in and make sure that he's what he feels that state is in, and get that moved forward. Oleg has this platform SIG JEP, which he wanted it held open for the moment, since he's still thinking that there will need to be a JEP for the platform SIG separate from just the creation of the SIG. I'm not sure why yet, but he asked for it, so I'm leaving it there.
His concern I think, was that the SIG JEP has not yet entered draft state, has it?
It's in draft. It's not accepted yet.
Oh, it's not accepted. So okay, it was a state-related issue to that JEP.
Yeah, there was some question around whether or not we can use a JEP before it's in accepted state, and the answer is yes. It just means that we have to be aware that we will have to continue to update our process and keep things in sync with that JEP as it moves if it changes before it hits while it's still in draft state. And then also he had I think so he filed a couple of JEPs there, and we closed one out as like, no, we don't need it. The other one, the platform one here, we're keeping open because I believe he has some things that he thinks that JEP may have some additional process around it that he wants documented. So I I hadn't gotten to the last 3 JEPs here in terms of looking at them. I believe they're all submissions for draft state. I think they're all by Oleg as well. No, one's by Jesse. And I'm assuming for the GSOC budgeting, Kosuke, you're going to be we're not going to delegate that to somebody else, or should we?
Yeah, that's my intent.
Okay, cool. Then I will. I can. Okay, I'll just note that here.
Actually, and Liam, could you put into the queue of questions after you finish that? Put into the queue of questions on the agenda. BDFL delegate request process. Do I recommend a BDFL delegate, or does that come in the process?
Yeah, I'd like to ask about that too.
Yeah,
because I'm happy to recommend a delegate. And I'd be an excellent delegate, Kosuke. I would be happy to approve my own Jenkins enhancement proposal. I'm more than happy to do that.
Yeah, we need a process for cases where someone who would be a delegate for their own proposal. We need like a counter delegate.
No, in this case, in my case, we don't. Maybe in yours, Sam, but in my case, I'm actually not a credible BDFL delegate.
Well,
there's actually some, just to make sure, there are a lot of cases where I have no trouble assigning sponsor and then delegate be the same person.
Okay.
Yeah, they can be. I personally worry about that just because I coming from a test background, I always like to have a second, like someone else to be the checks and balances person, but it's not required.
I agree with Liam. While it might be legitimate in some cases, I would not want to be my own approver for my own stuff. I need someone to keep me honest, basically.
I have a write-up buried in the earlier conversations in which I explain why that is. So back then there was this someone suggested that I should that in itself should be captured somewhere. So I guess for these questions and perspective, I think what's reaffirming that point that it should be extracted and captured.
Right.
I mean, I guess I could rephrase that as I guess the process would involve feedback anyway. So as long as it's got someone else approving it, just like a code review, that's probably okay. In terms of things.
Okay, I'm just going to comment this so I know going forward. Let's see what else. This external logging API plugin was submitted by Oleg, but has a bunch of comments and it needs an update. Let's see here. Yeah, it needs a motivation section. There's been some back and forth around the structure. Oleg has been questioning certain parts of the structure and how we want it to be different, but for now that's the structure we have. So I'm going back and making sure that happens. And this was, I haven't even had a chance to look at this yet. There was some questions, actually, Sam, from you, I think, about whether or not this should be a JEP or back and forth. So this will be this will be part of that. And we can use this as an example.
Yeah, that's kind of where some of those questions are coming from, I think.
Sure, yeah.
And I think, I think it's one that I'll probably end up reviewing one way or another, whether it's a JEP or a PR.
Right, exactly. Let's see. So I'm thinking if we have any other status updates. We don't have any other sponsors here to actually make requests for things to be moved forward or to be reviewed for acceptance or anything else, and that usually will happen via email anyways. And so I think we're good to move on to the other discussions that we might have. Yeah. Yep. So I don't think we need to go over all the JEPs all the time. There's no other sponsors here that had questions that wanted to bring them up with you in person, Kosuke. So I think we're good to just move on to general discussion here.
Actually, one observation that I'm making after looking at this kind of sweep in the list is I see people picking the BDF delegate, the sponsors picking the BDF delegates on their own. In general, I need that I think I need to avoid that. I need that be avoided, I guess. It's true that I think there's this like a 300 series in which that whole area we are actually in accepting 300. I made the explicit statement that I expected the future area of this to land in Tyler.
Right.
So that's the one that I'm okay with. But for example, the 202, and I felt like I didn't explicitly pick that person. And then it was no, actually not the 202, 207. 207 is said to be delegated to Jesse, but that's not how I want.
Okay. Yeah, I was sort of shortcutting that, and I probably shouldn't. Looking at the list of delegates right now, that's part of kind of what I was about to bring up, but around sort of having not necessarily a list of delegates, but that would also be part of this. I guess we just need to take it as, what do we do
so
here?
Maybe another thing to add to that, like the VDFL delegate selection clarification. I think I can. I mean,
Okay.
I think explaining how I'm using this, I think, hopefully make some of this clear.
Okay.
Then I got a running understanding I can capture it, so like a blanket delegation. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
So,
yeah.
So Kosuke, just for my clarity, then it's not desirable that the person sponsoring the JEP actually recommends who should be the BDFL delegate. That's truly something that is in your domain. You'll assign a BDFL delegate. That sounds great to me.
Yeah, that's the intent. Yeah.
The JEP itself says that either the BDFL will assign one, or that a BDFL delegate will volunteer, and then the BDFL will agree. That's the process. So maybe what I can do is here we go. So what I have is this assigned here. I'll put proposed after that for the cases where it hasn't been approved by Kosuke yet.
Okay.
Will that make sense? Because then that way the sponsor can suggest someone, and we can have someone other than Kosuke sort of be the sort of de facto, like, okay, yeah, we're thinking this is who it'll be, but then Kosuke will actually make the final call. Does that sound good?
Sorry. Yeah, sound good. I need to pause and step aside for a few minutes.
Okay, cool.
Or not.
Or not. Okay. Okay, so I will, so let's see here. Put this over here. Note that. So coming back around for just a minute, I've been doing a lot of the JEP editor work, and also with the structure of with the way that we've set up the down by one. There we go. The settings on this GitHub repo. I'm the only editors and owners can merge pull requests, and that's been kind of a weird stopper in terms of sort of a drag on things. So what I've done is created a couple other groups for JEP sponsors and JEP BDFL delegates, so that they also have the ability to write to the database, and this way they can. So the only problem with this is it means that any sponsor could merge any pull request, right? We don't have a way of controlling which sponsor merges to which one. Same with the BDFL delegates, but I think having that is better than having the bottleneck of the JEP editors, and mostly me doing the merging. I just wondering if anyone has any thoughts on that, if there are concerns.
Why not make it the BDFL delegates can merge?
And not the sponsors?
Yeah, because the sponsors may or may not be a delegate as well.
That's true. My intent was that since sponsors are responsible for the content of their JEP, then, but I think even, just having the reviewer be able to do it would make sense. You make a good point.
I mean, I could go either way. Like, if we want to reduce the barrier to changes, that would also make sense.
Okay. Go ahead.
Just one general kind of perspective I want to plant on everyone is I think I think we need to be careful the level of formalities and like process conformance that we need to aim for, right? This is I don't think we need to precisely control like every aspect of the details. So it's just I think we can assume that there's a certain level of trust within the people involved in these things. So that's always my kind of guiding principle.
Assume best intentions, sure.
Yeah. So I think the R community is a lot more functional than, let's say, like a U.S. Congress. And so where people deeply disagree and there's like a mistrust and so on, then those like a processes really is the only thing that holds things together. So you need a very strong and robust things that withstand even in the face of disagreement. But I think we are not. We are different.
And we're also shooting for consensus, which means it should be pretty clear when we reach that. I mean, consensus should be pretty. Part of it is intended to be like, look, it's obvious. We've all kind of agreed. We're all good. Great. Let's go.
Right. And we have other priorities that the U.S. Congress doesn't seem to have. It's just to get the stuff done in the least effort and frictions and stuff like that. Right?
Yeah, we're not following Robert's Rules of Order and whatever else. So,
exactly. That's all. Thanks.
Yeah. So okay. So I'll do both. I'm going to keep them as two separate groups, just because that way we're also kind of clear on the list of who's been a delegate and who's been a sponsor. And we can go from there. I'll send this. I'll update this and send it out as to the list. There's nothing in JEP 1 about who can and can't merge, so I don't think this is something that we have to specify. It's not a change to JEP 1. It's just like we can let this be part of the process and move forward. Okay, cool. As long as people are cool with that. So logistical questions. The first one was, so Sam, questions about what goes where, and I think you were saying that the Jesse's pull request was an example of this.
Well, I think I was unclear on this point. We'll put it this way, and the answers there kind of raised the point a little bit more and made me realize that I thought things worked a certain way, and I realized that those have never actually been defined. So I guess if I could phrase this as a question, the question is, when a JEP, when a JIRA, or when should we just be discussing within a pull request, basically? And I think I'm probably not the only one who's had that question. It doesn't need to be like a hard and fast set of specific rules. We're aiming for a lightweight process, but just some thoughts about when to use each.
Well, okay, so I'll start this from my perspective, I guess, which is that JIRA is good for bugs, obviously. Like if you have this something went wrong, I'm going to fix it. No problem. If you have an enhancement, people make a request in there. I think the point that I've had problems with is when you end up with a sort of a long string of people going back and forth with design discussion. And there is sort of a 4 or 5 different, at least 2 different perspectives, maybe 3, and there's no point at which the thing in the JIRA says, "Hey, this is our current." There's no description at the top that says, "Here's the current design," so I don't have to go digging through all of the discussion to find it. Right? That would be one point where I'd be like, there should be a JEP for this, because what you need is a current state snapshot picture kind of thing that stays up to date, right? Again, a PR, I've seen a bunch of the declarative pipeline PRs go really long with people going, I want this, I want that, I want the other thing, right? So yeah.
So my take, and I think I'm not really saying the same thing as you. I don't think I'm going to say anything inconsistent with what you just said. I guess I can think like really. I think it's sort of up to people driving effort to find whatever media that's productive to engage other people, whoever they think they need to engage, right? And then that's really you as a, up to that person. And then like we trust, part of the trust is like we trust your ability to be, sensitively pick the right one. Like we should, we expect you to know that the Jira is tracking bugs. So like, and I haven't seen, by and large, I haven't seen people fail to pick the right one. The only anti-example that I'm sort of consciously trying to instill in people's mind is something. I've seen some cases where the pull requests that actually brought the feature implementations resulted in discussions around the exit criteria of the feature, the design questions, and discussion about the design itself. Those are a symptom in my mind that some of the earlier phases of the conversation didn't happen. And this conversation is happening too late. And then that's, in my mind, part of the big motivation for bringing JEP is so that we can encourage people to have those conversations earlier on before code, like the significant effort gets invested in writing code. So that's if you can avoid that one example, I'll be feeling great. And then one last point is, in part because these conversations happen in lots of different places, in part because the nature of the conversations and the participants and stakeholders are different. In JEP, we try to link to where these conversations happen, right? So that other people can find and trace the reasoning and how they unfolded. So that's also in order to help you pick the right media. So, so that's how I feel.
So that I think helps clarify a lot in terms of like if there's going to be a prolonged discussion and you need a single source of truth, it sounds like a JEP is the way to go, and that makes a lot of sense. I'm still trying to figure out what we could do. So I think that's a really good point, and I'm trying to figure out if there's a way tooling wise that we could help support that for after the fact questions about a particular JEP. Like, could we use the GitHub issues then within the JEP repo or something? Or like, what would be a good way for kind of belated design discussions, or someone like wanders through and asks, hey, so could you explain a little bit more about X with this JEP? Like, is there?
So could you give an example of that?
So let's suppose I'll take an example. Let's suppose that the Google Summer of Code Kafka remoting implementation became a JEP. That's an example of something really clever and really cool. Mm-hmm. And that would be like perfect material for a JEP because of what it is. It's a big feature. It's novel. It requires some design discussion potentially. So if we put up a JEP for that and then it got merged, what would be the suggested path for then following up with questions on that? Like, do we open a GitHub issue? Do we treat that as a normal Jira ticket? Because I think that's like, I'd like to keep that as close as we can to the JEP, basically, because that way the author of the JEP can kind of help with those kinds of questions or can think about what they might need to amend, like if they need to specify something a little bit more, for example.
Right. So your questions around
it's more like mechanics, like thoughts about like how do we. I think that's probably not an issue yet, but that's something that it's kind of on my mind because I have some things that I'd like to make JEPs for that definitely will need more than one round of back and forth, probably.
Well, so first point, a JEP, when you merge the first time, that's the submission as draft and then approval as draft, then it's a draft, and the way that I have been directing people to go is you have a question. Like if you have just a straight up question that goes in the email list, like you start that question and then someone needs to go and update the JEP with the result of that question, right? And that's submitting a PR. If you have an opinion, if you're like, hey, and I actually prefer it this way, if you're like, hey, I think it should be like this, does this look right? That's, you can actually just create a PR that suggests the change that you think should happen, and then have the discussion around that.
That makes a lot of sense. So, and when you say the email list, you're talking about the Jenkins developers list.
Right, exactly. Or whatever the list is that's specified for that JEP. Generally the dev list, yes. I think the hard thing for a lot of people is getting comfortable with not making comments or asking questions, but actually putting in the extra sort of the trade-off sort of time. If you're to sort of say, I think it should look like this, right? Or to make some proposed modification, right? That takes a little bit of a different perspective, right? But I think it actually works faster that way.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the part of I don't think it changes in terms of where you engage the conversation. I think what hopefully helps is like you know who is the actual person that, like, if you're not sure, ultimately that provides a backdrop, right? Like, write the email to dev list, not really knowing like not getting any response and not really knowing like, okay, so what does that mean, And then now between the sponsor and like the BDF delegate, I expect you know the people, the actual person you can go to.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. I have other questions, but I shouldn't ask all of the questions.
It's good to have them. That's the way to go. So let's but for the moment, is it around this, or is there a new topic you have questions on?
Other kind of details about how to work the system here and how to make things.
Well, that's part of what this is for. So propose a PR with changes. PR. Okay. So the next thing we have on the list was BDFL delegate selection and how we go about it. So what we were talking about before was that, I think BDFLs can volunteer, but I think that I just shortcutted the only one that I actually shortcutted was this last one, and that just means I need to make sure that I'm putting proposed on there, and then okay, you can make the agreement that happens. That lets us sort of decouple you being around and having time to review them from people going, okay, yes. So.
Right. And maybe since I think for you to understand I think the criteria and the thinking behind choosing BDF delegate is very important. So if maybe we can talk about that now anyway. So I think I know some people see the BDF delegate almost like a code review referee, like just a second pair of the eyeballs, but that's actually not the way I intend to use this. I expect those like additional eyeballs to come from the other people that's really the part of the consensus. That all that the BDF delegate brings to me is a more way of adding a little bit of halo to the person who's like, I'm propping up as a lieutenant who owns specific areas, right? So that, because in community, open source community like Jenkins, this sort of de facto expertise and authority and ownership in the area happens very, very implicitly. So unless you are already in the know, you didn't know that Oleg is, for example, the sort of de facto leader of the promoting. So in part, this is to do that, and then in part by keep designating the same person for the specific area, I'm trying to ensure some level of the consistency. And then this person I expect that the BDF delegate to bring in the other stakeholders, other experts in that area, right? So like in this case of JEP 207, the way I'm I'm putting this effort, this external build logging thing, mentally putting under the broader umbrella of the cloud native Jenkins changes. And to me, the person to ensure consistencies and the person I expect to drive the consensus in that area is Kairos. So I expect him to be, I intend to nominate him as a BDF delegate. And Kairos, as a part of my expectation to Kairos is that he should know better that the Jesse is one of the experts, right? So I expect him to know that the part of the building consensus means getting Oleg and Jesse on the same page, thereby Jesse effectively playing this code review referee role, if you may. Right? So that's how I intend to use it. So hopefully that's I have a longer version of this, like I said, captured somewhere. So I'm gonna dig that up and then put that somewhere. But that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Okay, so they're more, just to summarize, they're more than just an expert in the area. They are a secondary consensus builder and code review referee, and sort of so there's the sponsor who does some of that and sort of should be trying to do that, but the BDFL delegate will also be doing that and also trying to bring more people in and sort of have a certain clout in that area.
Right, exactly, right.
Okay. So Kosuke, when...
Sorry, go on.
Go ahead, Sam.
I was going to ask, would it be fair to paraphrase that as the role of a BDFL delegate is to act as a mediator and to ensure that experts are brought in where needed to weigh in, more than to weigh in on their own opinion?
I think actually both. I think So there's definitely a mediator angle. So this isn't to say so there's definitely a mediator angle in recognizing that there are other stakeholders and so on, the historical context and all that stuff. That's part of what I expect for being the lead, being the leader of the influencer lieutenant in that particular area. But I also don't mediator, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds to me like a mediator kind of implies this mutual, impartial third person that arbitrates things. That's not this person I expect to have opinions and thoughts and so on. It's just that I expect this person to know that that's not the only thing that matters,
Yeah. So interestingly, a lot of what you're describing is what I would generally attribute to the sponsor of the, but I guess what you're also saying is that the BDFL delegate is then sort of the lieutenant sponsor, right? They're the second, they're the person that sort of has a broader responsibility over multiple ones, not just the sponsor for this one JEP, but sort of larger.
Okay.
Is that accurate?
I think so. I mean, I think of sponsor as the people who do the actual work.
Okay, and that's actually sort of a disconnect there. The sponsor they've tended to be, but actually they should be doing just as much of that consensus building as
right. Yeah, you're right.
As what you're describing. So they both should be doing that.
So Liam, my wrestle with considering the sponsor in the way you're describing it is as a sponsor of a specific one right now, and as more that I can see coming. One of the reasons I'm sponsoring is because I lack expertise. So I'm flat out not a credible BDFL delegate. And I suspect there are probably sponsors who are not credible BDFL delegates. Whereas the value of having a BDFL delegate is, I've got somebody who really knows their stuff in this area. In my case, maybe let's call it developer workflow, right? The experience that a developer has doing development work. And there's somebody in the organization or a BDFL delegate who really thinks about that and keeps consistency across multiple JEPs that may talk about code formatting or use of find bugs, switch to spot bugs. You pick your various choices, check style standards, things like that. So it's really good to have somebody other than the sponsor, and I'm relying on people with a lot more skill than I have in the topic.
Sorry, I got cut off. There's
Okay.
this like I had to do a local network technician support role yesterday and today, so I had to take this. Sorry, I'm
Cool.
back.
Okay. So right. Okay. That's good. That's good. I'm glad we had this. This is a good discussion for this because I agree. It's good to. It's also good to have the your perspective, Kosuke, on how you're choosing those delegates. Let's see. I'm wondering. We might want to have like a list of the BDFL delegates, like someone sort of tracking if you have defaults that we want to.
Yes, I think that'd be good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that sounds attractive because it does give a chance then to categorize things in ways that Kosuke had described categorization already, right? There are some broad categories where the BDFL delegate, he assigns that person and we start to realize, oh yes, this is one of the key experts in this area in the Jenkins project.
Yeah.
So what I'll do is I'll create an informational JEP that we can manage this inside. The informational ones don't have to be run through the same consensus process. They're more just like, okay, here's what we have, right? And so that way we can sort of post that in there and have keep that up to date as well.
That's what I meant earlier, to bundle that together with BDFL delegate selection in my mind.
Okay.
Yeah. So, this is a line of reasoning. This is how I'm using BDFL delegate. And then here's the other result of those things. These are the people who own different areas at the moment.
Perfect. So I'll set up an informational JEP.
Great.
And then we can iterate on it as needed.
Yeah. Perfect.
Cool. Okay. So, Sam, does that answer your questions around how they're selected, that kind of thing?
I think the questions around how they're selected weren't actually me.
Okay.
I think that was someone else.
Okay. Sorry. Cool. I'm just making sure that you're involved there. All right. So, what else? You had other questions, though?
I think most of them have actually been answered at this point.
Oh, okay. Cool. So let's see. So Mark, yeah, you wanted to talk about your.
So I've launched the conversations on the Jenkins dev list, learned a bunch of new things as a result of those conversations. So that was exactly the right thing to do. Now I'm starting to formulate the text, which is going into the pull request that will be the initial proposal for the JEP. I realized I'm not sure where I describe the envisioned developer workflow in the JEP. So the abstract, 200 words, present tense, that part I understand. Is it the specification or is it someplace else where I should be describing? And how would people describe, for instance, some other thing that involves a workflow or how work happens, a use case?
So yeah, I would put that in the specification. That the thing that happened with JEP 201 when we were rolling out the white, was that 201?
200, the whitelisting.
200, yeah, the white. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Was that we added the rollout plan, for example, in with the specification. Okay. So most of the stuff that talks about what's going to happen, the process itself or the design in general, most of it goes into the specification.
Great.
The default, I guess what I would say is if you don't see where else it fits, it goes in specification.
Okay.
Right. There's very clearly things like motivation and the reasoning and the other items on the other top level sections. But if you're like, it doesn't fit in any of those, it goes in specification.
Okay. And the next piece then for me was, is there any guidance that can be given on how to avoid over specifying? So my specific example, There are things that are very, very important, like that it's optional, that it's automated, what phase it occurs in, those kind of things. But I'm tempted to also put in things like, hey, we'll be using Google Java format, and it's intentionally this. Is that now over specifying, or in fact the right level?
Well, let's see. So let me go to actually JEP 300, which is what we've been calling it's. We don't have a JEP type for this, so it's an interesting sort of situation. We might create one for this at some point. It's a mission and goals JEP, right, which is designed to be sort of a high level view of, okay, here's our overall direction, here's what we're, the areas that we will be working on and what our intent is, and then we've had sub JEPs that actually discuss and design specific areas. There's no reason why you have to separate them out, though. And I think for what you're doing, it probably makes sense to keep it all in one place. So what I would do is have like a goals. So you have like a goals section under the, target audience or goals under the specification to say, here's who this is intended for. Here's what we're trying to achieve. And then here's what it tries to achieve. I'm trying to decide whether or not the stuff like the goals would go into motivation, right? But I think it still belongs in the specification. I think there's sort of a toss up there. So motivation is more talking about the history, like what, why are we doing this? Like, why would we need this thing? Well, because otherwise you have code that goes everywhere and no standard format, and who knows what's happening. The goal of the thing itself, that now that I'm talking about, it's like, no, that's actually that would belong in specification. You say, like, so here's the use cases, here's the goals. I think the point of specifying one specific thing is like, if there's any contention around it, if there's any controversy, if there's like, why are we, like, we chose this. If there's the potential for there being like back and forth about, well, should you have chosen something else? Then definitely that goes in the JEP, right? And sometimes you don't know until you actually include it or you say it, and then someone says, oh, but we should use something else, and then you end up. So I don't know. I mean, I guess I would say if you think it's important enough to be specific, it probably is worth mentioning. I mean, okay. You don't want to. I don't know that we have to be. You're not going to be including the implementation in the JEP. The specific. Okay, we're going to do these 5 things, but I don't know. Anyone have any other thoughts on this? It is still a design document, right?
Okay. All right. Yeah. So in this particular case, I think the target format is worth stating, if nothing else, than to test that it's not too controversial, that's the one that's been chosen.
And then also, I mean, the other reason why you might say that is so that you could say we're using Google Docs, and here's the folder that you would go to get more information on that. Like that would be how you would link people to that, right? So if someone, maybe the other way to say this is, if you put on your beginner mind hat and be like, okay, I'm someone who doesn't know anything about this, and I want to know what's going on. I should be able to read the JEP, and at the end feel like I am, I guess, ready to contribute, like able to participate in the any discussions going forward. Or, I mean, you don't want full documentation of, like, there's documentation and then there's a design document. So it isn't like going to be the level of detail that you'd get out of, in-depth, usage documentation. But at the end of reading your JEP, I should be able to go, okay, so if I wanted to do this with mine, I should go look at these. Like, if I wanted to use the formatter, I know at the end of having read this what went into the discussion and sort of what purpose it serves and where it came from. And here was, oh yeah, there was some back and forth about this, using this, putting it there, do that. Okay, I don't care about that though. I'll just skip that. And then getting to the bottom and saying, oh, here's the link to the documentation, here's the link to the plugin, etc. Right? And so you might not include actual instructions in the JEP to say how you would add it, right? But you would point to a document at least that would say how you would add it.
Okay, all right, I'll try to work from there. I think I like the notion of put the description in as part of the specification. If we then later throw it away, that's perfectly fine. Okay. I just see on the JEP you've got on screen, it's got a target audience, which I hadn't considered, and I'll certainly put a target audience. It's a good thing to note in this. Who are we focusing on?
Right.
Okay.
Maybe
and then
on like one kind of related broader narrative that I want to insert, and I haven't thought too much about it, so it might come across a little incorrectly, but I feel like the right, I want to have people to have a little bit more attitude on like how does this thing like a Jeff can help me get changes done, as opposed to like how best I can conform to this. So I mean, part of the effective use in the past of the Jeff was like you can kind of prevent the issue from endlessly getting rehashed, right? So like say if Mark is, for example, anticipating like he wants to so some of this like code formatting things that might be controversial, that like where he could use a little bit of selling, then like this could be a great vehicle to do that, right? Then if you see like a configurations code, that's kind of like what it did, was it tries to like set the stage to say, well, these things we kind of already agreed on among key contributors. So if you are coming on board from that, that's sort of the expectation I set on you, right? So that's part of the intended implied effect that it achieves. And just because we have this process doesn't mean like you have to do everything through it. So, there are optional services like this. And then if the first round of iteration is like, you just hacked up something that, hey, it works great for me. And then, that often, if you feel like that's a productive way to go forward, I don't see anything wrong in starting from that. It's only going to become like more relevant if your goal is trying to influence more people, is maybe how I feel. So then in asking that question, like, so what do I need to influence other people about? I feel like often the answer of like how this can help me. So, looking at the thread, for example, like there's back and forth around, is it a good thing that the compile phase is changing the source code, and what does that mean? So these are like, that might be like one example of, like your platform of like a pitching why you picked the way you did it is valuable. So I hope it didn't come out wrongly, but that's the...
Oh, no, quite the opposite. I think I want to be sure in my abstract that it describes the real benefit, not the mechanical what, but the real why. And for me, the why is about easier, stop rehashing, right? I want to stop fighting people about injecting spaces or tabs into my source code, into the source code. Right. I want the code reviews to be faster and easier because it's consistent. Right. And so those for me are compelling things, but I also don't want to damage the developer workflow because that would be a big negative. So yeah, I like that.
So like maybe another analogy I bring is like, so there's this thing in like a Japan called like a tea ceremony, right? And then it's like you're supposed to, on one hand, it's supposed to be like a little bit of occasion around tea to like enjoy the presence of each other, but it's also very formal. So for somebody new, like not doing it for years, like you get in there and then you always feel a little uncomfortable. Like, am I doing this right? Am I embarrassing myself? Like, how am I supposed to do this? Like, do I bring up the left hand here or like a right hand here? Like, how many times do I like move the teacup and all that? And that's not I don't want this to end up like that, as opposed to like, this thing is really meant to help you, help you get to what you want or what you need, like changes that you're trying to achieve, So sometimes it's not always like black and white and it's conflicting all and all that, but just
so the point you're making is that the point of the JEP is to try and help us get to not rehashing, is to achieve a goal. It isn't just to
one of the goals, I think. Yeah.
Well, I mean, but specifically, it's not there just to be an additional process that we have to slog through or whatever, that we have to conform to.
Exactly.
I think the one thing that I want to inject in there, though, is that from, at least from my perspective, the audience of pretty much any JEP is someone who does not know anything about what they're about to read. Right? They're like, okay, I want to know about this. What is the current state of this? And there's a lot of back and forth that's gone on a bit, and we're still in sort of early days of our working with this. There's a lot of back and forth that's gone on about what goes in what sections or what goes where, or people saying, well, I want it this way. And I haven't been very good about trying to communicating this, but like trying to basically keep people under the, to hold in their mind, look, when the reason why it's structured this way, why we have it in the sections in the order that we do, et cetera, is to make it so that someone coming in can get up to speed and understand this thing. And in that respect, so like, for instance, if you look at on the screen right now, this abstract is way too much, right? It's really interesting, but like there's somewhere in here is the abstract that should occur, right? And this is JEP 200 we're looking at, and this is just me. I'm not criticizing this one. This is one of the early JEPs. It's like, okay, so for example, this rollout plan should be moved inside. I should have put that up in the specification, for example, just to sort of, the part of what makes these things work is a conformance to a structure, right? And when we move further away from that, it makes it's similar to code formatting. If we don't have that structure, it makes it harder to sort of come in and know where to find things. If I understand JEPs, I should be able to sort of understand any JEP and know where to look. But as an example of something where it's like, okay, this abstract is way too long, but it's something that people are still kind of trying to figure out where things go. And so I think there's sort of a balancing point that needs to happen between adherence to process and also because and the reason we don't adhere at all is because that means that someone who is new will be able to look at this. And the point, for example, is that I can read the abstract and then sort of decide whether or not I want to read the next part of the specification. And then if I'm interested, like after that, if I'm interested, I can look at how was this before, right? But I might not be interested in that. I might not be interested in all the design decisions that the choices that were made back and forth. That would be the reasoning, right? Like, why did they choose this versus that? They did. I'm good, right?
So, I agree with that. Yeah.
And then finally, I mean, the only thing that I think we have sort of out of order for in terms of someone getting up to speed is that like the references, which would be hey, where would I go next kind of thing, are at the bottom. But I think we could even have that be someone could easily add links to documentation or something else to earlier in the document. So I agree. I don't think we want to have too much process, but I also think we need to kind of maintain a consistency of process, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I just want people to have their perspective, like make sure that they keep the perspective that this is meant to help us. Right? So that's something, so I'm not asking, like, this isn't, I don't know. Yeah, that's all. So I think I'm not disagreeing with anything you just said. And I think, in fact, the format has been great in putting out the kind of things that often left unsaid or like known as because the people who are like having these things, like they share so much context, and they don't often like do the sufficient job of selling or explaining why they did certain things. So you talked about the importance of capturing that, and I agree.
Yeah.
I really like that approach, that it's like a common format for readability, but it's not a completely rigid format. You adjust it as you need it. That makes it sound a lot more appealing, I think, in terms of like being able to put one together that fits the needs for any particular use case you're trying to document and get feedback on. It means you can kind of flex a bit where you need to if it's a particularly weird one that has a whole bunch of other, like, just doesn't quite fit the normal format, basically. There's a lot of room for kind of edge cases there, and that handles them well.
Right. Cool.
Right.
Mark, did you have any other sort of stuff you wanted to discuss?
No, thanks very much. Got the answers I needed. I've still got a lot of work to do on that particular JEP I'm working on, but I got the answer I needed.
Cool. And I think we're actually over time, so we should probably let everyone get back to writing more JEPs. Yes!
All right.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Ian.
Thanks, guys.